During the Puritan Revolution, at least two private groups began to meet regularly in London. One group was centered around John Wallis, a powerful mathematician to whose work Arithmetica Infinitorum Sir Isaac Newton was indebted for some of his major mathematical conceptions. Those who met with Wallis were interested in astronomy and geometry, and they included Christopher Wren, who was a professor in both subjects. Indeed, Wren's bold architecture was based in part on his geometrical genius. The Royal Society was formally founded in November of 1660 at a meeting in Gresham College, which began with a lecture on astronomy by Wren. And the society went on meeting at Gresham College until 1703. All right, so let's kind of go through our steps. Who's the person, place, thing, idea? What is brand new in this paragraph that I should probably be picking up on at this point? Well, it seems like it's John Wallis, right? Sir Isaac Newton, Christopher Wren, all these people. And really, with this entire group, who's the leader of the group? Who's the one kind of championing certain sciences and disciplines? Seems like Wallis is exactly the lead of it. And what are they focused on? What's their subject matter of interest? Seems like their subject matter is astronomy and geometry, right? So really, this whole part here, I think, is critical. So Wallis and astronomy and geometry. What do you want to take out of this when it comes to the mentioning of Christopher Wren and Isaac Newton, things of that sort? Do you want to pick up on all the small details about them? Or do you want to more so just say they were kind of in Wallis's cohort? Yeah, I think it's more so of the cohort that's important, because here we can kind of separate the two different groups if there are multiple groups. And we know that Wallis's group is going to be the one that contains all of these other scientists. So I would probably write something along the lines of Wallis believed in astronomy, geometry, and this includes Wren and Newton, something like that. Now, what is something else I should probably be highlighting in this paragraph? There's one other thing I should probably highlight. Yeah, I would highlight the dates. Why do we want to highlight the dates? It's because if you look throughout the passage, do you see dates mentioned in other places? Well, yeah. So you want to sort of catch on to any sort of timeline that the authors of the passage are trying to give you. So 1660, 1703, I think is perfect. So great. And just as a reminder, you don't want to write and highlight the same exact stuff. So really pick whichever one you're more comfortable with. All right. Do we get any sense of the author's tone at this point? Is he for, against Wallis? No. How would you describe the tone in this very first paragraph? Seems like it would just be more so informative. Exactly. So we just would want to keep reading at that point. Wallis's group probably began their weekly meetings in 1645, and about the same time, a second group, which was centered on Robert Boyle, began to meet. Boyle was a philosopher, a physicist, and a chemist. He revived, although in a form still far short of its modern form, the Epicurean theory that all matter is made of atoms. And he established the law that governs what he called the spring of the air, the pressure of a gas, which still goes by his name. Boyle called the group that met with him the Invisible College. So are we going in the same direction or the opposite direction? Are we still kind of describing groups in and around the Puritan Revolution? Or are we now just kind of talking about something 100% different? Well, seems like we're still going in the same direction, just elaborating on the second group. Exactly. So we want to do the same thing that we did with the first paragraph, identifying who's like the leader of this group and who is the leader of this second group for the second paragraph. Seems like it's going to be Boyle, exactly. So you would probably want to highlight Robert Boyle. And what is their principle or principles? Like, what are they fixated on studying in this situation? We know in the first paragraph, we learned about astronomy and geometry. Yeah, this one was more so going to be the Epicurean theory. Nice, exactly. So we want to kind of keep that in mind. Perfect. Now, if we look at this, is there anything else I should highlight that I haven't highlighted quite yet? I've done Robert Boyle, the Epicurean theory. I should probably also highlight the date, correct? Because we talked about how we're now getting a few dates, and so you want to start highlighting them. If it was only one date in the first paragraph, probably not that important. Now, if I were to write something down, I'd write the exact same thing, that Boyle really established this Epicurean theory, something like that. Now, does Boyle have any sort of followers? Remember, for Wallace, he had a bunch of followers. Does it seem like we have to clump anyone with this? Okay, who do we have to clump with Boyle? Who's his follower? Yeah, the Invisible College, nice. So you would probably want to highlight or write that down as well. Those are his followers. We don't get any particular names, but it is a good idea to highlight that. Nice. Do we get any sense of the author's tone at this point? For or against Boyle, for or against Wallace, for or against the Epicurean theory? Again, it doesn't really seem like we're actually getting anything. The author simply tells us that Boyle's philosophies and principles are still present today, but we don't really know if he likes or dislikes them. It seems still a bit more informative. So you would just have to keep reading. So both of these groups consisted largely of men of Puritan sympathies. Boyle's family had been on Cromwell's side in the revolution against Charles I. For although they were lords, they were upstart lords, created by Queen Elizabeth and holding lands that had belonged to the monasteries. All right. Same direction, opposite direction. Same direction meaning we're kind of fleshing out stuff that we've talked about. Opposite meaning we're now just completely transitioning to something that doesn't make sense. Well, I feel like this would be the same direction, right? Because we're still talking about the two groups at this point and really just talking about maybe how they acted or reacted during the war. So I think it would be the same. Who's the person, place, thing, idea, if anything, that's new in this paragraph that we should be picking up on? Is there anything? Yeah, Puritan sympathies, nice. And also the war, right? The revolution, how both of these groups acted during the revolution, nice. So if we think about Boyle's side, were they on Charles I's side or against it? Seems like Boyle's family was against Charles I. And do we want to focus on upstart lords created by Queen Elizabeth holding hands that had belonged to the monasteries? Do we want to start writing a bunch of bullet points saying Boyle belonged to the monastery? Boyle held hands with the Queen. Not so much. Yeah, I would just probably fixate more on there was a war and Boyle's family was clearly not on the side of Charles I, right? Perfect. So here, if I had to highlight some stuff, I would definitely write both groups are Puritan sympathies, and Boyle was against Charles I, something like that. And so if you were writing stuff down, same thing. I would write Puritan sympathies, and really that Boyle is against C1, Charles I. Do we have any indication of the author's tone at this point? Is he like, Boyle, why'd you do that? Or good job, Boyle. I also didn't like Charles I. We again don't really get any of that information. Still somewhat informative. All right. Plainly, the temper of the times in England was stronger than the political bias of those in power. Science had a new charm, and scientists had a new prestige. Part of this prestige may have come from their sense of mission and the aura which they were beginning to carry of being dedicated to the truth. Most of them were Puritans by birth and came from the families of merchants and smallholders who were thrusting their way into the world. But intellectually, their Puritanism did give them a special devotion to the honest observation of the world and a grave indifference to the authority of the past, both of which attitudes are still summarized in the word nonconformist. Okay, so same direction, opposite direction. Are we still fleshing out the groups that we had talked about, or are we now talking about something completely different that doesn't quite add up and we have to readjust ourselves? I think we're exactly continuing to flesh it out. Exactly. We're still talking about the Puritans. Who were the Puritans? It was the two groups. And what is the big idea here that we have to take away about the Puritans? What is their biggest thing, according to this paragraph? Yes, Puritans are dedicated to the truth. Nice. So are they always dedicated to the truth? Sometimes dedicated to the truth? Never dedicated to the truth? They're almost always dedicated to the truth, because the author's kind of telling us that really Puritanism, what they believe in, gives them a special devotion. Being devoted to something means you're going to stick to it. So a special devotion to the truth, to the honest observation of the world. So nice. Now, is there anything else in this paragraph that you might be thinking, wow, this is a main idea, something that I really need to pick up on? What do you guys think about the first part of it, where it says, really, science had a new charm and that people were interested in science? Is that brand new? Yeah, I mean, we didn't really learn about that, right? We learned about two groups and that was it. We don't know how popular these groups are. We don't know if everyone in the country at that point really enjoyed science. So we should definitely probably pick up on this. The science had a new charm. So nice. Do I care as much about really this whole thing? Part of the prestige came from the mission and aura that they were dedicated to the truth. Like all of that right there. Should I highlight that? Probably not, because it's kind of saying the exact same thing that we just highlighted, right? Intellectually, their Puritanism did give them a special devotion to the truth. So nice. Now, really, when we think about this, if we're looking at the actions of the Puritans, does it agree with a lot of what other people are doing? Being dedicated to the truth, is that what everyone is doing at this time? Nice. No, what gives it away that not everyone is being dedicated to the truth at this time? Okay, first sentence. I'm looking at a slightly different thing. Look at the very end of this paragraph. The word nonconformist. You see how that actually shows that we're not having many people dedicated to the truth because you're not conforming. If everyone else is doing something and you do something different, we would consider that nonconformist. Does that make sense? Perfect. So I would just quickly write that down, that not everyone is devoted to the truth, something like that. Perfect. All right. Again, if we think about the author's tone here, I still think that he's being informational. He doesn't say that good thinking, Puritans, being truthful is a great thing to be. He doesn't quite say that. So I would just keep going and kind of read this paragraph as being informative. Nonconformist means you're not conforming, meaning you're not doing what everyone else is doing. So if the actions of the Puritans are not conforming, that's why we can say that everyone else is likely not devoted to the truth. And the Puritans are maybe an interesting group that are devoted to the truth. The Puritans and their actions of being devoted to the truth and always finding the truth are nonconformist. Yeah. All right. Next one. So Charles II was a man of some intellectual curiosity, and he took an amateur's interest in science, but he could not have liked the Puritan scientists who had begun to meet during the Revolution and numbered among their group many who had risen under Cromwell. It's been estimated that of the 68 early fellows of the Royal Society, about whom we have information, 42 were clearly Puritans. Charles II could have hardly been enthusiastic about endorsing a society that was dominated by men whose political and religious views were distasteful to him. So, same question. Are we going in the same direction, opposite direction in this situation here? And this paragraph, actually. I would say same direction, right? Because we're just, again, fleshing out that relationship between the Puritans and Charles. And keep in mind, is this the same Charles that we're thinking about from before? Is this the exact same Charles? It's not. It's like a descendant of Charles I. So let's think about what's new. What is the brand new piece of information or pieces from this paragraph that you're like, oh, interesting? Well, one of them is going to be that Charles II did what? Was he all for science, all against science, a little ways in between? What is Charles II's view of science in general? Careful, he's not fully against it. He's interested, but how interested? Is he a little interested, a whole lot interested? Would he be in the lab with you? Or would he be like, oh, I'll give you a little funding? A little, exactly. So what gives that away? It's really this, that he took an amateur's interest in science and he had some intellectual curiosity. So does that mean he hates science and in general? Does he absolutely hate science and like wants to get rid of science? He doesn't. He has a slight interest in it. But what is his view of the Puritans? I'll give you some options. Does he wish that he could kill the Puritans? Does he find the Puritans slightly annoying? Or does he love the Puritans? Yes, distasteful, annoying, doesn't want to work with them. How about a deeply rooted hatred, almost to the point where he would kill them? No, exactly. That's a little too powerful for this text. We can't necessarily say that. So perfect. So if we go through this, I would have probably highlighted Charles II and then amateur interest in science. Remember those transition words, but. So that signals to us that, yeah, he's interested, but there's going to be something that throws a wrench in this whole situation. And that's when we learn that really he could have been hardly enthusiastic about endorsing them. So he wasn't very pleased to endorse them. So did he have to work with them? Did he have to work with the Puritan societies? Or was he able to kind of maintain a large gap? Yeah, he had to work with them. He just didn't really enjoy it. So if we were to write some stuff down, Charles II, slight interest in science. And then I would probably write annoyance at Puritans, something like that, because he really didn't want to work with them and he had to. All right, author's tone, anything that says, yep, I'm with Charles, I'm against Charles, or man, he should have gone a little easier on the Puritans, anything like that. Yeah, exactly. Nothing. Still very informative. So get used to some passages where the author literally doesn't uh, give you any sort of inclination of what's going on. So nice. All right. Next one. Yet Charles II did give his endorsement of the new society. It was named the Royal Society of London for the promotion of natural knowledge, and it received its first charter and nothing else from him in 1662. The man who persuaded Charles II to this step was probably the diarist John Evelyn. Evelyn belonged to a smaller group of scientists who had remained royalists, and the first presidents of the society were drawn from this group. Evelyn himself gave the Royal Society its motto, and he displayed the practical bent of the early fellows in his protests, now over 300 years old, against the smoke that even then fouled the air and withered the plants of London. Okay. Same or opposite direction. Same. What's the connecting piece here? What allows us to say, okay, the author's still continuing some sort of story? What are we further fleshing out? Seems to be the discussion of Charles II, right? And also the Royal Society. So let's kind of take a look here. What is the big like pieces, I should say, of information that I should get from this final paragraph? What about Charles II is important for us to know here? If we look at the first third of the paragraph, what did he do? He gave his endorsement. Nice. Now, when he gave his endorsement and got the first charter, exactly, were they showered with gifts? Was it like Charles II was sending charter after charter after charter? No. Notice how, for emphasis, our author puts, and nothing else. Do you think Charles II, as powerful as he is, could have given much more than a charter? Probably. So what does this indicate to you? Does this indicate that we were right, that he was annoyed at them and that he was like, just take what you want to take and leave me alone type of thing? Yeah. So that's really what this is telling us here. And we would want to pick up the 1662. So let's kind of start highlighting that. So 1662, and then he did give his endorsement, but I would really put nothing else, something like that to indicate that. All right. Now, really, if we think about this second half here, what is important to know about the second half, starting from 1662, really ending it? John Evelyn is introduced, okay? And do we have to know anything about John Evelyn compared to Charles? We know that John Evelyn is the one that probably convinced Charles, right? Do I want to fixate on the fact that John Evelyn belonged to the royalists? Is that something that's good for me to know? Yeah, probably not. Should I fixate on how John Evelyn gave the Royal Society its motto? Probably not. Probably not. Because I mean, was this whole passage about mottos? Like as a whole, not as much. I mean, these all seem like small details that you can find. If a question asks you about John Evelyn, do you guys agree that we would just go here and find the relevant info? So all this excessive detail here, I don't think you necessarily need to pick up on. You kind of want to wrap it up at this point. So we have this larger story, which is two groups during the Puritan Revolution, their relationship with Charles, and how these two groups got something out of Charles due to this guy. John Evelyn. But do you think John Evelyn is a part of our thesis? Like, this is the John Evelyn passage as a whole? I don't think so. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You could have tried maybe to connect it to the Royal Society, but I think at this point, just kind of keeping them separate because our author did. So nice. So I would probably just highlight persuaded Charles was John Evelyn, something as small as that. And if I were to write something, it would be Charles II, annoyed still, and then John Evelyn. Something super short, and obviously use whatever symbols you want, because at the end of the day, you want to interpret it as such. All right. Is everyone okay on the passage? Perfect. Sort of okay. Any questions I can answer before we dive in? Puritans are the nonconformists, yeah, because they're dedicated to the truth. When that's what it means to be a nonconformist. It means you don't really go with the grain. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Go ahead and privately message me to either account, really, whichever one you pick, doesn't matter. And I'll see it. So let's start with 82. All right. What relationship does the author imply between Puritanism and 17th century science? So let's take a look. A, the Puritan political sympathies that prevented royal funding were a barrier to science. Do we say that? Do we say that they have a barrier to science and that they can't practice their science? No. So I don't know where that's coming from. B, the Puritan emphasis on the classical theories Encourage scientific conservatism. I don't remember conservatism ever being mentioned. I don't know if you guys found it anywhere. But again, you just can't make up words like that. We didn't really talk about that. The Puritan renunciation of worldly interests discouraged progress in applied science. Again, is there some sort of like effect where we're diminishing science as a whole? And we're not. So I don't exactly know where C is coming from. How about D? The Puritan quest for truth, for its own sake, promoted scientific inquiry. Can we say that? That these two groups were dedicated to the truth, which is why one of them was interested in astronomy and geometry, the other one, the Epicurean theory, that they promoted scientific inquiry. We can absolutely say the answer here is D, and every single person got this one right. So awesome. And this one, I would argue, is a reasoning within the text or really a comprehension. So nice work there. All right, 83. Let's see. Could you say that paragraph 4, last sentence, makes that answer true? I think so. Definitely. I mean, especially since they're nonconformist, right? If you're a nonconformist and you're still doing it, it must be because you're truly just wanting to discover the truth. You're kind of paving your own path. All right, 83. All right, I'm messaging some of you that need to reassess. All right, does everyone need a couple more minutes? Okay, let's take a look. So, let me clarify the question stem and maybe that'll help some of you reassess. Which of the following statements, if true, would undermine the author's characterization of the Puritans? So, start by just characterizing the Puritans. What are some adjectives that the author would use to describe them? We kind of had to come up with a laundry list of them. It would be that Puritans are what? That they're devoted to the truth, right? That's one big thing. And that they're somewhat persistent and that they're nonconformist. Does everyone agree so far? Yeah, that they're interested in science. So we are looking for an answer that would introduce doubt on any one of these. So we're looking for something that would introduce some doubt for us. So if you read A, B, C, D, which one would make you question all of these? Like, I thought that I would have anticipated the opposite. So I'll give you guys another minute and then we'll look at it. Okay, let's take a look. So, which of the following statements, if true, would undermine the author's characterization of the Puritans? Let's see. So, let's start with A. They opposed ideas that weren't supported by religious doctrine. Would that undermine any of these ideas that I've written down? If a Puritan person, it would. Which bullet point would it undermine? It does undermine one of them. If they oppose every idea that does not have religious doctrines to it, can they be truly devoted to the truth? If they're like, oh, it's religious or non-religious before they even look at the truth of it. Yeah. So exactly. So I think A is a good answer so far because are we anticipating that Puritans are going to put their religion at the forefront or truth at the forefront of how they evaluate different things? They're going to evaluate truth. So do you see how this undermines the author's characterization? because it shows that they're putting religion before truth. There could be some religious doctrines that are false, and this is saying that they'll still accept it. So I like A. B, they challenge the scientific conclusions of acknowledged authorities. Would that undermine or support what the author had said? It would support, right? Because when would a Puritan challenge the scientific conclusions of an acknowledged authority? When would they actually do that? They would do it if something was false, right? If something wasn't true. So this would support. C, their leaders made no attempt to encourage an interest in science. So keep in mind, are we focused on the leaders of Puritans, all Puritans? Are we just focused on the leaders? Or are we focused more on truth-seeking behavior? A versus C, which one? So the behaviors of their leaders, did we focus on the behaviors of Boyle and Wallace? Or did we say, when we talked about Puritans, if you go to this paragraph, what did we say about Puritans? We said that they're devoted to the truth. So does that make sense as to why C is not as good? Okay, all right. Did we talk about wealth? Did we talk about how they're trying to amass wealth, about Puritans? Did we say that they forego wealth to seek the truth? Did we say anything about wealth? That they're poor because they're trying to seek the truth, or they're super rich because they're trying to seek the truth? Do we talk about their financial status? We did not. We did not. Some people pick D, and tell me if this was your logic when picking it. I picked D because I thought if they amass their wealth, then they're more focused on money than the truth. Is that what some of you thought? But the thing is, where in this passage does it say anything about money, right? We never said that they are losing money because they're devoted to the truth. We never said that. We never said that they're poor because they don't have, they're devoted to the truth. We didn't say anything about their financial status. So for sure.
So I guess my logic in that was that my logic was, because they say they devoted the answer is they devoted their major efforts to amassing wealth through commerce. I was thinking that if the author spends his entire time telling us how much they really care about the truth, they really are interested in science, they only want to seek out the truth, their special devotion and whatnot, that if they somehow, for whatever reason, you come to find out they're devoted to amassing more wealth and commerce, I felt like that was a direct it wasn't a correlation to what was going on in the passage. And so that made me think, if these statements were being made, this would go against what the author was, which could undermine his argument in a sense. That's what I was thinking. So I guess that's where I was from this question.
I see your point, but I guess one thing I could counter that with is, could you be devoted to more than one thing? Couldn't they be devoted to the truth and on the side, maybe having a side hustle of making some money? Also, second thing is, this passage never talked about wealth. So I see your logic. I see it. It's just, notice how A is saying that they only support ideas that are supported by religious doctrine. We say nothing here about truth. So that's slightly better.
So,
but I see your point.
Okay. And this is my last question. And just, I guess when it comes to like questions I ask about undermining, except not, I guess, not least passage, paragraph questions, like how should we, I guess, frame our thinking when it comes to these kind of questions? Just for, I guess, a better understanding of how to attack these kind of questions, honestly.
Yeah, so here, the first thing I thought to myself when I read D, for example, was I was thinking to myself, in the context of this passage, what would this author think if Puritans were trying to make some money? And I never learned what they would do with money. I never learned, like, do they enjoy money? Do they put aside money to pursue the truth? I don't know anything about money. And so that's why I kind of felt a little funky with even picking D. And then when I went to A, it's very blunt. It's like they literally, any idea that comes through the door, they will automatically shut it down if it's not in their religion. And that to me was far more against what the author told us, because he's saying they would shut any idea down that's not truthful. But A is focusing more on religious doctrine. So that's how I thought about it.
Okay.
These are tricky because it's the reasoning beyond. I think that's what makes it so tricky. Hopefully that makes sense though.
No, no, it does. So just trying to keep, so just keeping our thought process, like still using the passage, but just thinking a little bit further, I guess, outside of it. Is that what we should try and do? But
Yeah, yeah, just a little bit, because let's kind of think about the counter to D. Like I had said, a counter is, couldn't they devote their major efforts to amassing wealth and to the truth? You could kind of
mhm.
finesse either one here.
Okay,
Whereas A, you can't do that. You can't really say, but they're also opposing ideas that are not supported by the truth. This doesn't say that there. So that's
mhm.
what I would do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So to just make it clear cut, A is the best answer here. All right, 84. And this is a reasoning beyond. All right, let's take a look. Which of the following items of information from the passage provides the best evidence that the author has correctly assessed the attitude of Charles II towards the Royal Society? So, what is Charles II's attitude towards the Royal Society? In the passage, we had said that it's somewhat of this annoyance that we talked about. So, we can keep that into consideration. So, if we think about this, the annoyance came in this paragraph. And so, does rising to prominence, a lot of the members rising to prominence, show us how he was annoyed? Which is A. It does not show us how he was annoyed. B does not show us how he was annoyed. C again does not show us how he was annoyed. D is an action that Charles II directly took to show us how he was annoyed at the Royal Society. He only gave them a charter and nothing else. And given that he's a man in power, you would assume that he would probably have been able to give more than that. So D as in dog, or delta, is the best answer here. And this is more so reasoning within. All right, 85. According to the information provided, the attitude of the king towards the founders of the Royal Society was most like what for number 85? So let's make sure that we're setting this up correctly. We are looking for the attitude of the king to the Royal Society. So the first term in each of these answers has to be the one corresponding to the king. And the second term has to be the one corresponding to the Royal Society. And so let's take a look. Does the king feel like a dog who's irritated by fleas by the Royal Society? That makes sense to me, right? Because we kind of talked about that annoyance. So I like A. Are we comparing like an ancient bird to today's birds, or two types of species that are similar? Like, are we looking at old versus new? That doesn't quite add up. Are we looking at the king trying to kill the Royal Society and commit some sort of murder, like a lion to a gazelle? They're his prey to a certain extent. No. And what's the issue with D? First is it's saying that the king is a mouse and that he's being hunted by the Royal Society like a cat, right? But what if it had said cats to mouse? Would it be right at that point? Careful. Are cats irritated by mice, or do they murder mice? They murder. They usually kill mice. So I think cats to mouse would be very similar to the lion to the gazelle issue. they kind of play with the mouse and then they usually kill it. So remember, killing or completely getting rid of the Royal Society is not the king's intention. He was just irritated. So I really like a dog to fleas. So nice work here. And this is reasoning beyond. All right, 86. All right. A reasonable supposition from passage info about the two scholarly groups is that papers on the foretelling of events through astrology were presented at meetings of what? So really we're trying to connect who is studying astrology, right? So we have astrology here and we're trying to figure out who would that belong to. A lot of students will think that it'll go with astronomy, which is Wallace. A lot of people will think that. But astrology and astronomy are not the same thing. Astronomy is the study of like planets, stars. Astrology is like your fate, palm readings. Have you guys ever seen like little shops for astrology readings where they'll see if your stars are aligned well for like marriage, for money, for wealth? So they're slightly different. Actually, they're very different. So what would be the best answer given that they are not the same thing? Well, it's going to be A as an apple. It would be studied by neither group in this situation. And this is reasoning beyond the text. Super, super, super tricky. All right. And that's that. Let's go ahead and kind of mark what most students get right and wrong so you guys can figure out where you stand. So let's see. Most people get 82 right. Most people get 83 wrong. Most people get 84 right. Most people get 85 right. And 86 is commonly wrong, simply because of the small difference between astrology and astronomy.